It's time for Sustainable Living with Glenn Boblitz, the show that helps you be prepared to care for your family regardless of the circumstances that may come your way. Now, here's your host for today, Mark Lamb.
Well, we're welcoming Glenn Boblitz back to the studio. Good morning, Glenn. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Sun shining. It's a good day.
It is a good day. So what is our topic of choice today?
What stems from our little homestead groups, and we all were talking about growing grains for our breads.
Okay.
We had that fungus those guys were trying to bring in, the Chinese were trying to bring in. They got busted for that.
In a backpack.
Well, the conversation led to, I wonder if that was the only one. Well, duh, of course not.
No. They say there's up to 8,000 Chinese nationalists.
Okay, what if
in our
all
country.
8,000 of them had a little packet of this fungus?
Right.
To take out our grain supply.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand how critical that really is.
Yeah.
Not to mention the number of products that come from grain, not just bread, folks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Corn has, I think it's 2,800 products that we use daily.
Yeah.
So that was a big threat. And did one of them succeed? I don't know.
We don't know. We only know of the one that I think they caught, or the two that they caught.
Right. And it was such a simplistic plan,
Mm-hmm.
they could afford to lose a few.
Sure.
So, all they have to do is get lucky once. We have to be lucky every time.
Yeah.
So the odds are, oh crap, I better do something here.
Sure.
So the discussion came to, what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do? What should we do? First off is increase your seed bank. Seed bank being heirloom.
Mm-hmm.
For me, you can do this any way you want. You can buy the hybrid seeds and just buy a lot of them, but you can't save the seeds to plant for the next year. That's the difference between hybrid and heirloom.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I say seed bank, I'm saying something I can plant every year.
Mm-hmm.
That's my preference. If you don't want to buy that kind of stuff, and they're not exactly the same varieties, I don't care.
Right.
I just want you to have seeds to grow. So increase your seed bank just in case. I'm not saying go out and buy a combine or a wheat harvester. All those things it takes to bring in a grain crop like we think about a grain crop.
Mm-hmm.
So it became very mechanized and kind of out of our hands. And that's so we could do it economically. Well, let's say you do have 5-10 pound of seed, mm-hmm. and that's enough to do a little backyard patch. If you're growing corn for your cattle or your pigs, or including yourself, there are varieties that you can grow for that. There's also varieties that you can grow for that and eat. One of them that I use is Ohio Blue Claridge. It's been around for about 400 years. Mm. Now, granted, you do end up with blue flour, corn flour. Mm-hmm. Makes really cool looking cornbread. Mm. You catch it early during its development, and it's very sweet. You can eat it corn on the cob. Let it go a little longer, and you can make your chicken feed out of it, your
okay.
Cattle feed out of it. You can also take that same corn and grind it for cornmeal for your consumption. So it's an all-around corn. Now, it's not some little stubby, ugly ear of corn. I mean, I've got pictures online that huge ears, 12 inches is mm-hmm. pretty good. And that's close to what field corn is. So at any rate, having this seed bank available. Now for wheat, rye, the cereal grains, mm-hmm. that stuff is much harder to harvest, thresh out, store, grind, all of the above, as opposed to cornmeal.
Okay.
So if you actually want bread, you're going to have to grow one of the wheats or one of the ryes or oats, but you're going to need those cereal grains, that we know the the verse that says, "Man shall not live by bread alone."
Right.
Okay, what's that tell you? Bread must be darn important. If it got its own line,
In the Bible, right?
so important of context, spiritually and in this physical world. Okay, we know that bread is a staple. It's been a staple for thousands of years. About every history book you start reading about, and if they mention food, bread's going to be in there. 1800s, that was a big deal. You know, how do you keep your family fed with something that's filling and that kind of thing? How do you store for the winter? And they did it through grains, cereal grains. Now, to grow this is not the easiest thing in the world. Now, there's two ways of doing it. One, you can plant in the fall, and it'll die back. Then come spring, it'll take back off. It looks like you've planted grass. And it'll come back. Now, the reason they do that is it causes a biannual cycle of which the plant will be more mature. Ergo, you get better crop, larger crop, more pounds per acre. The little stalks that come up, they're called tillers. To give you an example, if you just plant in the spring, harvest in the fall, you may have 3 tillers which will produce a head of wheat. You'd plant in the fall, let it winter over, and come back and let it grow a whole another season, spring through summer. You may have 7 tillers. That's the benefit. So a little planning there, a little more knowledge on what you're doing as far as growing wheat. That biannual crop, there's several of them that are like that too. And there's different qualities of the wheats, you know, the hard red wheats, the durum wheats. You hear these names, and well, what are they used for? Well, like the durum wheats, they tend to be for breads and things. A hard red wheat, that's something that you can grind fairly easily at a homestead because it tends to hold its firmness. So you have to do a little research on what varieties you want, what you want it for. Then you have oats. Oats are good. You can eat them fresh, and you can eat wheat fresh. They call them wheat berries. You know, the seed, they call it a wheat berry. When you cook it like a porridge, you know, whole grains, wheat berries. Or you can crack it and make cream of wheat. I love cream of wheat as a kid.
I remember that
you know?
as a kid.
My mama liked it because it was cheap and easy to feed 6 kids, you know. That was an easy meal. So there's a lot of things with grains that we use and don't really think about. It's going to be pretty important. Some of the other types of wheat have a lot of gluten in them, which is kind of important for making breads and doughs that are elastic.
Okay.
Pizza, for instance, has a lot of gluten. You see the guy throw it up in the air and spin it.
Yeah.
The only reason he can do that is because the glutens in there are kind of elastic. That's the deal with that. They make good sourdough breads, that kind of stuff. You'll get a denser crust off of it. But had some sourdough yesterday, homemade sourdough, not just sourdough. I'm talking friends of ours who, you know, she's really good at
this
sourdough.
is the lady.
This
that
is
was
the
at
lady
your
you want to
event.
talk to if you want to make sourdough. She's just been doing it a long time. Is really good at it.
Sure.
And I just soon trade her some squash, which is what we did.
Okay.
So my point is, you're gonna have to educate you. You can't just say I'm gonna grow my own wheat. Okay, well you better start educating yourself on growing your own wheat. And it was kind of sprung on us with the threat of this fungus. I mean, what would happen if this actually got out? And I say, what if? That margin is getting very thin. So let's say it does get out and wipes out, and it'll spread like wildfire because the spores will just go all over the United States. Wind will carry them and pretty much wipe out the Midwest. That will pretty much shut down farming. Okay, so then what? Well, the second year, there's not going to be much to collect seeds from that has not been contaminated.
Right.
So now the spores are going to go into the ground and probably contaminate the field for several years until the microbes in the ground take it out. You know, we got good microbes too. So if bad fungus is coming in and there's not enough for the bad fungus to eat, the other microbes will multiply them and take them out. So that means you got to wait 3 to 4 years for the ground to sterilize itself. That's why I was saying have the seed bank. Don't plant it the next year, because that spores are still out there and very active. So I would wait 3 to 4 years, and that's what we've done. I mean,
Okay.
buy 20 pounds of wheat and say, okay, this is my fallback plan for bread, for my grains, because everybody else is going to get wiped out. So you put that back in a nice container with some oxygen absorbers, Mylar bags, whatever you got to do, store it in a cool, dry place like we always tell you. You may be the only person in your whole county that actually has wheat. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've grown some wheat, and you have to know when to harvest it. Now, this is where experience is going to come in. Your local farmer, when he has a crop of wheat out there, it's getting close to maturity. He'll go out there and you know, like the commercials, you see the guy standing in the wheat field and he's holding the wheat and he picks a piece and he looks at it, he squishes it. All that is telling him what condition his wheat is in. Is it mature yet? The little heads on them have started to fill out. They're starting to get firm. He understands, okay, that's 2 weeks away. Comes back the next week. Did it progress like I thought? Well, it got a little dry, so it didn't quite fill out. And rain tomorrow, you know, that's what farmers are looking at. Rain tomorrow. Okay, now it's looking good. It's all nice and plump, beautiful golden amber fields of grain.
Yes.
And then it rains for 3 days, and the moisture content gets really high in it. And he goes, dang, I can't harvest until this stuff dries out a little. It'll just mold, fungus up, and I'm screwed again.
You'll lose. Yeah.
So now the plant has continued to grow, and the little head just no longer stands straight up because it's heavy, and it starts to curl and point towards the ground. So that plant is getting ready to throw its seed off naturally.
Okay.
So if you bump it and a bunch of seeds fall out, it's way past maturity, and the farmer just goes, crap, I'm going to lose about 15 to 20% of my crop. That's how delicate our food system really is.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll say he's had a perfect year. Next thing he's going to check is how well it's drying on the stalk. Is the stalk nice and golden? And he'll pull one of them little seeds out and bite it. That's the big test, high-tech test method is to bite the thing. So you bite it, and if it's dense but still doesn't crack, okay, it still has a pretty high moisture. Now, he knows that. So, okay, I got 2 more dry days coming. On the second day, I'm going to harvest this like a madman before it starts drooping over and blah, blah, blah. So he brings out a $1.2 million
piece of equipment,
international harvester, and starts cutting this wheat. And it's got an extra attachment to it called a header. The header cuts the head off, the bottom part of the combine. You see the big wheel on the front, rotates it around, pulls it over, bends it a little bit, gets cut at the bottom, drops it onto the header. The header cuts it off, kicks it to the back, the fanning mill that's set up inside, beats it all up, knocks the chaff off of it, and it spits out that tube into the truck next door.
So that's what's going up that tube. Okay.
That's why the thing costs $1.2 million.
Sure.
You, on the other hand, will have to go out with your sickle.
Right.
You know, whether it's a little hand sickle and you just got a couple rows in your garden, or you have a pretty good patch where you would use the old-timey scythe, you know, the Grim Reaper scythe, you know. Now, that's not what you would use, that Grim Reaper scythe, unless it has the cradle on it. You even know what a cradle is?
No, I mean, I've seen the sickles, obviously.
There's not many people that even know what the grain cradle is. It attaches to that scythe, and as you pull across and cut a batch, you know, a swing, if you would, it falls over into these fingers that are standing up, made out usually out of wood, and you'll get enough to make a sheave. A
Okay.
sheave is usually as much as you can hold in two hands.
Okay.
So they fall over into this wooden net, and they turn the side over and dump it in a pile. So it's nice and neat, being gentle so you don't knock
Sure.
the grains off.
Makes sense.
I watched a guy do this, and he was pretty amazing with it. And they don't swing that side like they show in the movie. That is not how that's done.
Okay.
They kind of put it between a row, grab a certain amount of grain, and give it a quick pull. That blade should cut them all. Now, you didn't realize how sharp that blade would have
It
to
has
be
to
to
be
do
pretty
that?
sharp, yeah.
Right. Anyway, so that's how it's harvested. And then they would come by and pick these clusters up, the sheaves, take one of the tillers and wrap it around and tie it off. Now you got a little bundle called a sheave, bringing in the sheaves.
Yeah,
that's
old
just
song.
like the old
my dad
song.
used to
Yeah.
sing that old gospel
I
tune.
remember it too. And they would stack them in a pile. Then they would bring the wagon out later, and all the kids would throw them up on there. Yeah. Now you've harvested your grains. You got to take it to the barn and either cut the heads off or have a threshing mill if you're lucky enough to have something like that. Or they cut it off and they let the oxen thresh the grains, and they would put them on a rope or a wooden arm, and let him walk in a circle, the threshing floor. And it was in the middle of the barn in the dry, and he would just walk until it beats the grains off. And then they would rake some back, gather up what's there, and you would think that the oxen would eat all the grains.
Right.
Well, if you know your Bible, it says don't discipline the oxen just because he takes a bite of your grain. Let him eat all he wants. Motivates him.
Right.
He just keeps walking.
Right.
Chews his grain while he walks around and gets another bite. So everybody gets paid fairly.
Sure.
So you threshed out this grain, you knocked all the little seed heads off, but now there's a hull on it. This little hard shell, not much of a shell, but it's a coating around the grain, and you got to get rid of that too. And they put it in what they call a fanning mill, or they would put it in this large screen basket and throw it in the air. I mean, this stuff's been done for thousands of years.
You're right.
Luckily enough, some of these machinery are still around, this little threshing mills. And it's just a fan that beats the head up, knocks the little chaff covering off, and blows it out the back end. What you end up with is clean grains, pearled grains, like pearled wheat, pearled, what was the other one I always think of? Anyway, your grain has been pearled. So when it comes out, it's a nice shiny little kernel that you can store. You got to watch it. Now, this is where a lot of people will mess up. If that's not dry enough, you must dry that grain, and you could check it by weight. If you have a quart jar of wheat, it should weigh X number of ounces.
Okay.
Now, if it weighs an extra ounce, it means there's an extra ounce of water in there.
Okay.
So what they do commercially, they put it in these huge grain bins, big metal buildings. You've seen them, got the little cone top.
Yeah.
They got heaters and fans on the bottom. Bet you didn't know that. So there's an extra expense to the farmer. So he blows air up through them for several weeks. Now, most of them were gas fired for the heat.
All right.
Big expense. Electricity, big expense. And then he would, once they're that dry, then he could ensure that they'll store properly.
Okay.
And by then, they would either sell
So
them.
it's kind of like a kiln of sorts.
Yes. Then
Yeah.
they would either sell them to a bakery who would bag them and store them and put them in dry storage in a humidity controlled environment.
Okay.
And that's where these large bread makers and pastry makers and whoever else is processing these grains, that's where they came in. So he just has to give them a good product that is not moldy in any way, no funguses in them, that kind of thing, because he's done if it's the way it is. He's just done that. They won't even take it. So now it's just nothing but feedstock for cattle.
Wow.
So you're going to have to do the same thing. You would take your grains and, like I said, you would make sure that they were dry enough, that 15% is what you're after.
Right.
A, to keep the seed viable. B, to make sure it doesn't grow fungus. So you store it. Now, you pull it out at some point and make flour out of it. Would you just immediately make flour out of it and just store the flour? Bad deal. A, it starts losing nutrients as soon as you start grinding it into flour.
Okay.
So if you're going to grind the flour, you should use the flour. So what they would do is do it in 5-pound, 10-pound increments. Or you take it to the miller and you trade your grains for flour.
Okay.
And he skims 20%, 15 to 20%. That's been done for thousands of years also.
Right.
All right, grinding that grain. Now, you can buy a hand grinder, and they're all over the internet, grain mills, You grind that thing, grind it long enough to get 1 pound of flour. You're going to be there a while. I mean, it is laborious.
Yeah.
If the moisture is not right, it'll cake up on the inside of the little grinding wheels. They call it a burr. They're just kind of slots in a metal plate, 2 metal plates rubbed together, and crack it, grind it, smooth it out, gets finer as it does it. That'll bind up, and nothing will come out the bottom. And you go, where's my nice, fluffy flour? It ain't there because it got stuck. Now everything's all back. You tear your entire little hand mill up,
Right.
hand mill apart, and clean it out and start over. You do it twice, you ought to figure it out. There's too much moisture. Put it on a sheet pan, set it on the back of the cook stove, let it get dry again. Now you can grind.
Okay.
We haven't eaten any bread yet, have we? That was a long process just to get it to the grind.
Yeah.
All right, so you ground some flour. Now, my suggestion is you grind it twice. You grind it once to crack it, get it kind of smooth, about the consistency of cornmeal, then sift it. Sifted Martha White flour. Remember that commercial? And it's very fine flour, so it has to be sifted. So you sift your flour, and that'll get rid of anything else that came through your process. You don't want to end up in your flour. So you get rid of the chaff and stuff, and they would blow it off, and all you got to do is shake it, let the wind blow it a little bit, and then regrind again. So you get this nice, beautiful flour. That way you get a nice, smooth textured bread or biscuits or whatever. Otherwise, you're going to get a very coarse bread, very dense bread. Some people like the brand and all that on you. That's not horrible for you. A lot of the sourdoughs still have the brand on them, and that's why they're kind of dense, kind of heavy, but that's okay too. You may need the fiber. So you've ground it, and you've learned to do all of that. Now you get ready to bake your bread. Where are you getting the yeast from?
Let's take a break and talk about the yeast when we come back. How about that?
We'll let that one grow.
We're with Glenn Baublitz. He'll be here all week, people, for a comedic relief. This is Sustainable Living Made Easy.
Get ready for a new soundtrack for your life. Doc Rock, Smith Mountain Lake. It's music that'll take away your troubles for a while.
That's what I'm talking about!
Wake up with Janet and Mark on the Morning Jam. They'll keep you informed and encouraged, and we all need more of that.
You say jam?
You're invited to be a part of the Doc Rock family, your feel-good station. Doc Rock, Smith Mountain Lake.
We're back with more Sustainable Living with Glenn Baublitz. Be sure to look for Sustainable Living on Facebook for even more information and follow-up conversations with other members. Now, here's your host, Mark Lamb.
Back with Glenn. Glenn, I interrupted you. You were talking about yeast, and so this is a whole different animal here. This is, everything is
science
sort of,
class.
Yeah, it's live and breathing, and the yeast is no exception.
There's a bakery, I think it's in New York or New Jersey, that has been using the same yeast culture.
Right.
In other words, it's live and growing and bubbling in a jar.
Yes.
Probably a very big jar, but for like 126 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
I bet he's ticked every time the power goes out. He's like, "Holy crap! I got to save my yeast." But why they use it for 126 years is because every yeast has a different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's kind of like wines, depending on what yeast you start with in your wine will determine the flavor of your wine.
Mm-hmm.
Same way with bread. Well, apparently it is this stuff, man. Everybody up there just buys as much as they can bake because it just has that little bit of different flavor.
Right.
So that's them. I just want a slice of bread for peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm not the connoisseur of breads, but some of these people in our little group are serious about bread.
Right.
And I am glad they're good at it. So you can make a sourdough culture out of the dry yeast cake.
Okay.
And if it comes up and it does well, it bubbles and you test it. I think they call it proofing. You proof your yeast to make sure it's still alive.
Okay.
It'll start bubbling up like soda and you go, okay, it's good to go. You can either use the dry yeast and just do a dry mix, or you can ferment it, let it ferment itself. It really does it on its own.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to feed it a little bit of sugar.
Right.
So you have this liquidy mixture to make your breads with. And it's much more active. You get a much higher loaf, all that kind of good stuff. So that's a technique. How you keep that alive that long? Well, some people just keep it on their counter because they bake so much bread. One lady, she bakes bread every week.
Okay.
My mother did. My mother made 5 loaves of bread every week.
Wow.
It's okay to sit it on the counter. Okay, but how do you replenish the supply? Well, you put in a little more flour to feed it and a little bit of sugar to keep the bacteria happy and working. So as you use it, you feed it. You use it, you feed it. All right, well, I don't want to make it every week.
We did that a number of years ago, and I remember when you said sugar at first, I go, okay, I remember sugar, but I thought flour, and then you got to the flour, but when we would put it in, we'd work it into the bag. It was in a big Ziploc bag in our fridge.
Right.
And you just kind of put it in there, and you work it in there and kind of mix it, and then put it back in the fridge until you're ready to use it.
Yeah, because it was in a bag, that's how you stirred it.
Right.
I don't care how you do it.
Right.
And there's lots of ways to do it, and mine's not perfect for sure. But the refrigerator slows the whole process down. Mm-hmm. It's hard to work when you're cold. Same way with yeast. So it slows it down. Maybe you want to only make bread once every 2 weeks. You want to be able to make the bread when you feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
And at 85 degrees, you don't want to be baking a bunch of bread in your kitchen and your wife be just sweating in there because it's 85 out. She's like, I ain't making bread today. But the idea is to, keep a culture going. Mm-hmm. Or you can buy a bunch of yeast. Yes? No. It'll die in a little package. You get the little single serving package made by Fleshman's, I think is the most popular brand back in when my mom was doing this. She'd buy the little box of packets and it would do 5 loaves of bread.
Okay.
She would use it all.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like she had to store it. But the other 10 packets in the box would last about a year.
Okay.
So you got to keep that in mind. That's what I've heard. That is not damn true.
Interesting.
My wife was kind of wigging out on the fact that everybody was saying, oh, you can't keep yeast more than 2 years. Well, because it was not definitive, you can't go by the use by date.
Right.
They want you to throw it out, buy more to get that right, people.
Sure.
That's a marketing ploy. But so we had a packet, a block of yeast, 1 pound block of yeast. She says, we're going to find out. So we got it out. It's 2 years out of date. Of date. So that means it's 3 years old. So she pulls it out. She proofs it.
Right.
To see if it's going to bubble and the little yeast are going to wake up and do their job. And they did.
How about that?
So I'm wondering, how long can you do this? I'm thinking that if you can put it in that little state of hibernation, and we do have a very cool, dry place to do this, If you can keep it in that hibernation, the odds of you being able to maintain that are pretty dang high. So, if you're serious about the future and the condition of the future, and you want to be a bread maker and have bread for your family, this little bit of information should save you and just take that burden off of you. Could you imagine trying to keep a jar of yeast going for 3-5 years? That'll be tough.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how long you'd have to store and keep things and while the crap is happening. And by the way, crap's happening a lot.
I want to.
I mean, goodness gracious, have people lost their minds?
When we get done with this, I do want to address it
we
just for
could
a
go
couple
off
minutes.
into the weeds on this one for a couple hours. In fact, every news broadcaster out there is going, holy crap, what is wrong with these people?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're back to bread. Let's
right.
just stick with bread right here. Well, there are a few recipes and things to making breads that don't require you have this fantastic bubbly yeast,
Okay.
the leaven. You can actually get yeast out of the air. There are millions of these yeast floating in the air. So you can actually have some sugar water there, and you would cover it with a very loose muslin cloth so the little bacteria can get in there. And if you see that yeast and sugar, that flour and sugar mixture starting to bubble, that means some wild yeast got in there. Now, some people will use raisins.
Okay.
Because raisins and grapes have that natural yeast on the outside. That's how it protects the little grape.
Okay.
So that was a form back in the 1800s.
Interesting.
You need to research. This is a really good subject to get into. So the more ways you have to make bread, the better off you are. But this type of yeast we're talking about, the natural yeast, is enough bubblies in it to make a good flatbread,
Okay.
to make pita pockets.
Yeah.
All of the above. You may even get a biscuit to raise up a little bit hard, higher than a hardtack cracker.
All right.
My wife was not the best at making biscuits to start with.
Gotcha.
Now she's the queen of the biscuit. I mean,
Oh,
she
that's
makes
cool.
the best cat head biscuit. Jerry Clower would be proud to
Wow.
eat one of her biscuits.
Yeah.
But it took practice.
Right.
It truly did. So the other thing you're going to need if you're going to be making any kind of breads, biscuit, is some type of shortening, because you're not going to be able to go and get Crisco at the store. So we use lard. Now, we don't use just any lard. Now, lard can be any fat off a
Any
pig.
animal. Yeah,
Right.
pig,
No,
right.
not any.
Well,
Tallow is from a cow, and
Okay.
you can use tallow also.
Right.
But you want the cleanest, non-tastiest,
okay. Yeah.
because some of that
You don't
fat
want
is
it to
very
influence.
strong. You can definitely tell that
Right.
that's lard. Used to come in big 5-gallon cans, but that's all the fat mixed up, blended, and melted down and filtered, and that's
Right.
your lard. Leaf lard is the pretty white lard inside the carcass when you butcher, and you take that out immediately. Now, it is so fine that the heat from your hand will cause it to melt.
How about that?
So that's a
Wow.
really good thing to bake with. Makes the flakiest pie crust, ladies.
Okay.
Makes the most moist biscuits,
Okay.
and doesn't leave that heavy farm taste.
Right.
I don't mind that taste. Truthfully, if I go, wow, that was made with lard, that is not going to bother me at all,
Right.
But, especially if it's got some good homemade butter on it,
Sure.
or a little honey, okay. But so that's another item before you can get bread. Dang, there's a lot of stuff to just have bread.
Sure.
But they've been doing this for thousands of years, folks. Copy it. Learn how they did it so you're not caught off guard. They did it back then. They didn't have Kroger's back then.
Right. Right.
And we're talking Roman times. Romans threw bread at the Colosseum to keep the peasants quiet and entertained.
Wow.
That was the whole purpose of the gladiator games, was to
Keep the people.
keep the peasants from
Overrunning everything.
because they were taxed to death.
Right.
Boy, that sounds dang familiar, doesn't it? I think Trump better start throwing some bread out there because we're getting kind of tight here, folks.
Yeah.
Our supply chain is looking ugly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it stopped, and
Right.
it'll probably never stop until it does.
Until it does.
Right. It'll just get really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Supply and demand. Okay, well,
Yeah,
if you're the only family on the block and make bread, you can pretty much barter that bread pretty much for everything you need. And then that's the whole principle. Isn't that what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
That's what I want you to talk about in sustainability. You can't do it all. You can't raise all them grains, but if you got one guy that can, one guy that can grind it, okay, somebody's going to have to partner up here.
Yeah.
And they did that for centuries.
Sure.
Then Kroger showed up. Then Food Lion showed up. I mean, they don't have to do that no more. But that just made you vulnerable
It did.
to their whim.
The industrial age was
Yeah,
great, but
well,
it pushed people into the cities. They left the
I mean,
farmland.
the
to
industrial
go-
lazy age. Yeah, okay. You know, it did keep things cheap for a while. That's what it did do for us. It kept us from having to spend a lot of time in the field. Yes, it did that for us. But it made us work like a dog to pay for it. And that's an issue. But that's about all I had for weed, you know, just bread of life, you know. It may be pretty important to you. If it's the world's staple, it probably should be yours too, because there's a lot of goodness that comes out of that bread.
Sure.
It's a good staple item. So hope that helped. Hope that at least got you to say, I'm going to research this a little more.
One of the things, and I only want to open this up just a tiny bit for us to talk about a future show. We know if we watch TV in the last 72 hours, we've seen what's been going on in Los Angeles and the overrun and people going nuts and just, you know, I mean, they're just, and it's primarily the criminal element that's going cray-cray over there, and they're attacking, you know, local, state, and federal.
But it's organized, though.
Well, it's organized.
Yeah.
But that could break out really anywhere in any of our big cities. So, and even our smaller ones. So maybe one of the things we can talk about is just some first responder things that we would do ourselves.
Oh, so you want to get us thrown off the air?
No, but I do want to talk about
I'm just telling you,
what we
need to
should
have a
keep our
muzzle.
eyes.
You need to have a muzzle ready for me, because you know I could slip off at any moment when we get to talking about that subject. I'll behave.
And I don't, you know, we won't go into the political aspects of it other than to say government, just look at North Carolina when hard times hit, those folks are still trying to rebuild. So if you're relying on the federal government, you've put your trust somewhere in the wrong place. So we'll leave it at that. We'll come back and talk about that on a future show. That's why this program is
it's
so
important too, and I agree. It's an ugly subject, but you better address it.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Join us again next week for Sustainable Living with Glenn Boblitz, helping you be prepared and not scared. This podcast drops every Friday anywhere you get your podcast.